The email arrives on a Tuesday in August. Congratulations, your child is registered for kindergarten. Underneath the celebration for one specific kind of family, there's a quiet moment of chaos because that email means something the school district never mentions. The $980 a month daycare bill that's been running on autopilot for 5 years is about to just stop. And almost nobody plans in advance for where that money is actually supposed to go next. It either disappears into everyday spending within about 6 weeks, or it becomes one of the biggest financial turning points in the entire span of raising a kid. I'm Alora. When my son started kindergarten, that $980 a month daycare bill vanished overnight, and for almost 2 months, I genuinely could not tell you where the extra money went. It wasn't one big purchase. It got absorbed into slightly nicer groceries, a few more takeout nights, small conveniences that felt earned after years of tuition. By the time I actually sat down and looked, 7 months in, we'd quietly spent almost $4,000 of found money with nothing at all to show for it. If you've got a kindergarten start coming up, or it already happened and you're realizing right now that money quietly disappeared, I'd love for you to subscribe and stick around. I'm trying to reach as many moms as I can right at this exact transition because it's one of the biggest, quietest financial opportunities in the whole span of raising kids, and it is incredibly easy to miss. So today I want to walk you through 6 specific financial markers I'd tell any parent to have in place before their child starts kindergarten, the ones that turn this transition into a real turning point instead of a few $1,000s that just quietly evaporates. Marker 1, redirect the daycare payment the same week it stops. The plain habit is deciding in advance exactly where that daycare-sized chunk of money goes the moment it's freed up, instead of letting it quietly blend into everyday spending. Picture the day the final daycare autopay clears. Instead of that amount just sitting loose in the checking account, an equal automatic transfer is already scheduled to move it straight into savings or a future-focused account the same day, no decision required in the moment. A family that redirects $980 a month starting at kindergarten and keeps it going for the next 13 years of school has put aside over $152,000 in contributions alone by graduation before any growth at all. A family that absorbs the same $980 a month into everyday spending instead has, by that same date, exactly nothing extra to show for it. That vanished $4,000 I mentioned at the start is exactly what happens in the gap between those two families. We weren't reckless. We just never decided in advance, and undecided money has a way of disappearing politely. This week, or before your own last daycare payment clears, set up one automatic transfer for that exact amount, dated to start the same week daycare ends. Marker 2. Build a specific school year cost fund. The habit is planning ahead for the fact that kindergarten isn't free. It just moves its costs to places that don't show up until they arrive. Supplies, fundraisers, Spirit Week outfits, field trips. Picture the first week of September, a $180 supply list arriving with zero warning, followed a few weeks later by a $60 fundraiser catalog and a $25 field trip fee, none of it budgeted for anywhere. A typical kindergarten year of these small hidden costs adds up to somewhere between $600 and $900. Without a dedicated fund, that becomes a dozen small stress purchases scattered through the year, usually funded from whatever's easiest, often a credit card. With a $75 a month fund started over the summer, the entire year is already covered before the first supply list even arrives. I remember standing in the school supply aisle genuinely stunned at a $180 total for a 5-year-old's supplies, glue sticks included. I hadn't budgeted a cent for it because nobody had told me to. This week, open a small dedicated fund labeled School Year and drop in the first $50. Keep feeding it through the summer before the year begins. Marker 3. Revisit your emergency fund for the new schedule reality. The habit is recognizing that a kindergartner's schedule, shorter days, more sick days, random closures, often changes a working parent's income reliability in a way daycare never did, and the old emergency number may no longer fit. Picture the first random half day, a teacher in service morning nobody flagged on the family calendar, and the scramble to cover 3 unplanned hours of work with 0 backup arranged. A parent missing even 4 to 6 unpaid hours a month because of new school schedule mismatches can lose $150 to $300 a month in income if paid hourly. Across a 10-month school year, that's $1,500 to $3,000 that the daycare era emergency number was never built to absorb. Our first surprise early dismissal came exactly 1 week into the school year, and I remember standing in the pickup line realizing our whole daycare era plan had quietly become outdated overnight. This week, pull out your child's actual school calendar and recalculate your emergency fund target based on the real number of early dismissals and closures, not the daycare era number you've been carrying out of habit. I want to pause here for a second because I know this can start to feel like a long to-do list stacked on top of an already emotional milestone. You don't need to do all 6 of these in 1 week. Even one, started now, changes how this year goes. I'd love for you to subscribe and let me walk through the rest of it with you because that's exactly what this channel is here for. Marker 4. Start or revisit one account earmarked for your child's future. The habit is treating kindergarten as the natural checkpoint to either start or seriously reevaluate one dedicated account for your child's future, instead of leaving it as a someday idea. Picture 10. Quiet minutes at the kitchen table, pulling up whether this account even exists yet, and if it does, actually checking the contribution amount against a real number instead of an old figure set years ago and forgotten. Starting $50 a month at kindergarten, age 5, gives that money 13 years to grow before college. Starting the exact same $50 a month 5 years later, at age 10, means losing 5 full years of that growth window, a gap that's much harder to make up later than it is to simply start earlier. We opened ours the month our son started kindergarten, 10 minutes online, nothing complicated, and the biggest thing I learned was that the delay itself had been the only real obstacle the whole time. This week, check whether this account exists for your child. If it doesn't, open it with any starting amount, even $25. The account mattering more than the amount is exactly the point right now. Marker 5. Have the kindergarten cliff conversation about work and schedule. The habit is planning, on purpose, for the very real gap between a school day that ends at 2:50 and a workday that ends at 5, instead of assuming it will somehow sort itself out. Picture the specific moment, usually mid-August, standing in the kitchen realizing there are 2 hours and 10 minutes every single weekday with absolutely no plan attached to them. After-school care arranged last minute in a genuine scramble commonly runs 20 to 30% more than the same care booked ahead of time, closer to $16 to $18 an hour. Scrambled versus $12 an hour planned in advance for the identical after-school gap. We didn't have this conversation early enough the first time and spent the first 3 weeks of school piecing together a patchwork of favors and last-minute sign-ups at premium rates. It was avoidable, and it wasn't cheap. This week, put one specific date on the calendar with your partner to map out the actual after-school gap and the real plan for covering it, well before the first day of school. Marker 6. Update your will and guardianship paperwork. The habit is finally handling the legal paperwork that kindergarten has a strange way of making impossible to keep avoiding because your child is now genuinely a person out in the world. Picture filling out the school's emergency contact form, listing guardians and pickup permissions in careful detail, and realizing in that exact moment that your own family's will and guardianship plan was never actually finalized. A basic will typically costs somewhere between $150 and $300 as a one-time expense. Without one in place, decisions about your child's care and your family's assets default to a slower, more complicated legal process that most parents would never choose on purpose if they'd simply had the conversation ahead of time. I filled out that school emergency form and sat in the parking lot afterward, genuinely unsettled, because I realized we'd never finished ours either. We'd started the paperwork years earlier and just never sent it back. And this week, schedule 1 hour, even if it's just to research an attorney or make the appointment, to finally finish or update your will and guardianship designation. So think back to that email arriving in August. Congratulations, your child is registered for kindergarten. None of these 6 markers are really about daycare bills or supply lists or paperwork. They're about treating one of the biggest transitions in your family's life as exactly that, a genuine turning point, instead of letting it slide by disguised as just another September. That's the whole philosophy underneath all of it. Not a single dramatic move. Just deciding on purpose where this new season of steady is actually going to take you. If this gave you a clearer picture of what to do before your own kindergarten milestone, I'm Alora, the finance mom, and I'd genuinely love it if you'd subscribe and stay with me. I'm walking through one of these every week for moms building something real at every single stage, and I'd love for you to be part of it.